What's up, traders? Welcome back again to another video. We're here to discuss about the Federal Reserve. As you all know, the Federal Reserve will be meeting next week on Wednesday, where they have a decision to make on whether to raise rates by another 25 basis points or to deliver what we call a hawkish skip. So we're here to see what are the odds so that we can align ourselves well in next week trading. Okay, so buckle up, manze. So we are going to start by a brief history of the Federal Reserve quantitative tightening campaign, and QT is all about removing liquidity of the market. And what it does is that it discourages lending and encourages saving. So generally, it benefits the saver and penalizes the debtor. Okay, and that's how it removes liquidity out of the market. And the Federal Reserve has been on a very aggressive tightening campaign since March last year, where they have raised rates by 525 basis points, which translates to 5.25%. And I think the last time they were this aggressive was during the era of Chairman Paul Volcker. Okay, so and this is how they distributed these rate hikes. They started by raising rates by 75 basis points at 4 consecutive meetings beginning in June of last year. Okay, then the FOMC gradually slowed the pace of subsequent policy tightening, hiking rates by 50 basis points in December 2022. Okay, they continued to slow down the pace of tightening to 25 basis points at each of its first 3 meetings of this year. Okay, they then followed it with a skip in June, and then delivered another 25 basis points in July 26th. Okay, as you all know, the FOMC did not meet in August because of the Jackson Hole Symposium, so there was no decision in August. Okay, and why has the Federal Reserve been raising rates? One reason: price stability. And why is price stability important? Well,
price stability is the responsibility of the Federal Reserve and serves as the bedrock of our economy. Without price stability, the economy does not work for anyone. In particular, without price stability, we will not achieve a sustained period of strong labor market conditions that benefit all.
So the Federal Reserve is a dual-mandate central bank, which means that it has two jobs. The first job is to ensure that there is price stability. The second job is to ensure that the economy is performing at maximum employment. So we are going to look at these two mandates and see where the Federal Reserve is at each of these two mandates. Okay, so we are going to start with the price stability, and the metric that is used to measure price stability is inflation, and there are different indicators of inflation that the Federal Reserve likes to use, and we are going to look at them. Okay, so we are going to start with the personal consumption expenditure, which is the Fed's preferred inflation gauge. Okay, the reason as to why they like to prefer the personal consumption expenditure over the CPI. Go do the homework, you'll see. So in July, the personal consumption expenditure increased by 0.2% month on month, which translates to 3.3% year over year. Okay, the core PCE, which strips out the volatile prices of food and energy, came in at 0.2% month on month, which translates to 4.2% year over year. Okay, on a 3-month annual rate, or when you use a 3-month moving average, the PCE increased by 2.9%. And some of the biggest pandemic era drivers of inflation are fading, which with the core goods prices declining and housing inflation slowing over the past 2 months. Okay, so now let's look at the other inflation indicator, which is the consumer price index. If you look at the headline CPI, it did increase to 0.6% in August. On an yearly basis, it increased from 3.2% in July to 3.7% in August. So headline CPI has been showing signs of reaccelerating. Core CPI, which strips out the prices of volatile food and energy, came in at 0.2% in August, same as last month. On a yearly basis, it reduced from 4.7% in July to 4.3% in August, which is good news. And remember, the core CPI will show you where headline CPI will go to. So the Federal Reserve like to focus more on core, because headline is usually affected by changes in the prices of energy, food. So it kind of skews the data and doesn't give a true measure of inflation. Okay, so if you look at the core CPI and the core PCE, they are all showing signs of inflation moderating. But if you compare it to their 2% target level, remember the 2% target level is adopted by many central banks. And the reason as to why they adapt this level is because it's a level that is neither restrictive nor accommodative to the economy, which means that it's a neutral rate. because too much inflation is bad for the economy, and also too little inflation is not good for the economy. If you look at what China is facing right now, there's a disinflation problem. That's a problem that is caused by too little inflation. So inflation has to be there for the market to thrive or for the economy to thrive, but too much inflation is bad. Okay? Look at the core CPI and the core PCE. They are showing signs of inflation moderating, which is a good thing. And let's look at the other mandate, which is maximum employment mandate. And before we discuss this, you should know that the labor market affects the levels of inflation, because a strong labor market fuels inflationary pressure because of the wages. If many people are employed, that means that the demand for goods and services will go up. If the demand goes up, then price will automatically go up. Also, another metric that is of the labor market that is used to measure inflation is the wages. If wages increase, automatically the purchasing powers of consumers will also go up, which will also increase the demand for goods and services, hence leading to high inflation. So for inflation to come down, the labor market has to cool. Okay, it has to moderate. A strong labor market will lead to a very aggressive monetary policy response from the Federal Reserve. Okay, and a cooling labor market will lead to a friendly monetary response from the Federal Reserve. Okay, so this is how the labor market has been performing. So the NFP, the non-farm payroll growth, has slowed to a 3-month average of 150k from a reported 244k when the FOMC met last in July. The unemployment rate rose to 3.8% in August, its highest rate since February 2022, fueled by a surge in the labor force participation. Okay, and one thing with unemployment, you should know that it is directly related to inflation. There's a relationship between the two, and economists usually like to use what we call the Phillips curve to show the relationship between the two, which is an inverse one, which means that for inflation to come down, unemployment has to go up. And if you look at the levels of unemployment, 3.8, I think they are consistent with bringing down inflation. Okay, so let's move on to the JOLTS number, the Job Opening and Labor Turnover Survey, which measures the number of new hirings, and it shows that the demand for new workers has cooled, as evidenced by a sharp decline in job openings in July. Okay, however, low and steady layoffs indicate employers are holding on to existing workers. So, yeah, ADP data, which measures the number of people who were employed in the private sector, it also reduced from 312k in July to 177k in August. These numbers are consistent with the pace of job creation before the pandemic, which shows that the labor market is normalizing. So, as I've said earlier, a cooling labor market will result to a friendly monetary response from the Federal Reserve. Okay. If you look at the employment cost index, which measures the change in the cost of labor, okay, it showed that businesses are more easily meeting hiring needs as labor cost growth has started to slow. Okay, yeah. So if you look at the two mandates of the central bank, which is price stability and maximum employment, and price stability mandate, it shows that they are making progress when it comes to fighting inflation, keeping in mind that inflation did peak at 9.1% last year in June. Right now they are around the 4% level, so they have made progress, but they're not done yet. Okay. If you look at the other mandate, which is maximum employment, it shows that the labor market is starting to cool. So they should avoid tightening further so that they don't end up weakening the labor market too much. Okay. And how has the US economy been performing? If you look at the GDP, it's projected to strengthen in Q3 of 2023, underpinned by a pickup in consumer spending. So whenever you hear GDP is projected to increase, just know consumer spending also will go up, which will end up fueling inflationary pressure. Okay. Survey data also suggests that growth has improved over the past few months, with the ICM services index rising to a 6-month high in August. You also have the ICM data came in. It was an upside surprise, which shows that the US service sector is doing well. Okay. Atlanta Fed GDP now model, which is nowcast and not a forecast, estimates the US Q3 GDP growth at 4.9% quarter per quarter. Okay, so summarizing all this, we've seen inflation is starting to reaccelerate, especially in the headline. Okay, we're seeing the labor market is cooling. So uh, summarizing all this is that even if the August CPI surprised to the upside, I highly doubt it will spur the FOMC to hike again next week. Policymakers have been stressing that the cumulative amount of rate hikes and the uncertainty surrounding the lag effect of policy changes require moving more cautiously at this juncture of this cycle and assessing a longer period of data before determining the next move. Okay? And in addition, a few relative hawkish members of the committee have indicated they are comfortable leaving the Fed's fund rate unchanged in September. Uh, if you look at the Fed governor, Christopher Waller, said that recent data would allow us to proceed carefully and that there's nothing that is saying we need to do anything imminently. Okay? Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic said that the Fed's current rate stance is appropriately restrictive and that they should avoid excessive tightening to prevent unnecessary pain, and that patience is needed for monetary policy to impact the economy. Okay, Dallas Fed President Lori Logan said that there is work left to do to get to a sufficiently restrictive policy, and that skipping does not imply stopping rate hikes. Okay, so if you look at all these Fed speeches, you will notice one thing in common: they all want to proceed cautiously from now. Okay, and this is what Federal Reserve Chair had to say.
Risk management considerations are critical. At upcoming meetings, we will assess our progress based on the totality of the data and the evolving outlook and risks. Based on this assessment, we will proceed carefully as we decide whether to tighten further or instead to hold the policy rate constant and await further data.
There are several things that you should watch out for on Wednesday. The first thing that you should watch out for is the FOMC minutes and statement. And if you look at the July's FOMC statement, it maintained a stable tone, signaling no major changes in policy stance. And the minutes to the decision also showed officials continued to have a bias to hike further, since most participants continued to see significant upside risk to inflation, which could require further tightening of monetary policy. So watch out for the September's FOMC statement and FOMC minute. See what those FOMC members are saying. Okay. Also, another thing that you should look out for is the summary of economic projection. So what you should watch out for is the US growth projection. The June summary of economic projection contained a median real GDP growth projection of 1% for 2023. Based off the strong data over the past few months, I expect this forecast will be revised higher, perhaps as high as 2%. So watch out for that. The thing that you should watch out for in the SEP summary of economic projection is the inflation expectation. In June, the medium FOMC participant expected the headline PCE inflation of 3.2% and core PCE inflation of 3.9% for 2023. The latest forecast looks for headline and core PCE to be between 3 and 3.4. So the forecasts are projecting that the core PCE and PCE will decline in Q4 of this year. So watch out for that. So what will a stronger economy and a slower inflation outlook mean for the dot plot? Given that the inflation continues to recede, I highly doubt that the FOMC will want to signal tighter monetary policy that was not convened in the June SEP. Okay, so they might maintain that. I doubt the median dot plot will fall much either. The committee members probably will be wary of sending an overly dovish signal when the fight against inflation remains incomplete. Okay, so the June projection showed a median Fed funds rate of 5.625% for the year end of 2023. Assuming the FOMC does not hike rates on Wednesday, the June dot plot would imply that one more 25 basis point rate hike is still on the table of the two remaining FOMC meeting of this year. So if they don't hike on Wednesday, which I highly doubt they will, that will be a hawkish scale, because when you look at the dot plot, it will imply that they still have one more hike rate left, one more 25 basis point hike rate left. So if they don't hike this month, there's a probability that they might hike in November or December. So that will be bullish for the dollar. Okay. What are the chances of them hiking this week? If you look at the SME Fed Watch tool, it shows that there's a 98 chance of them leaving rates unchanged. So the SME Fed Watch tool shows that there's a 2% chance that the Federal Reserve will hike on Wednesday. So yeah, and one advice I have for you as a trader: don't fight the Fed.
The old saying is, don't fight the Fed.
Don't fight the Fed.
Don't fight the Fed.
Rule number one as a young trader you're taught is don't fight the Fed.
I don't know what the hangover is going to look like down the road from all this extraordinary stimulus, but for now, the markets love it. Don't fight the Fed.